The ship landed on Veshon Prime, with a low hum that rattled through the metal walls and shook the floor beneath Alara Maddox's boots. She was 12 years old, and she was the only human on the entire planet. She pressed her face against the viewport and stared at the world outside. Veshon Prime was beautiful in a way that made her chest hurt. The sky burned a deep violet, and 3 moons hung in the distance like pale coins tossed into water. Towers of white stone rose from the ground in spirals, and between them floated platforms connected by bridges of light. Thousands of aliens moved along those bridges, and none of them were human. "Come on, Bricks," she whispered. She reached down and unlatched the reinforced travel crate at her feet. The doors swung open, and a small scarred creature with coarse gray-black fur waddled out. He looked up at her with dark eyes that held no fear and no softness either. His name was Bricks, and he was a honey badger, and he had been with Alara since the day she found him half dead in a collapsed burrow on the frontier colony world of Harlan's Reach. He hissed at the viewport. "I know," she said. "I don't like it either, but we're here now." The ramp lowered, and Alara stepped out into the light of an alien sun, carrying nothing but a small pack on her back and a honey badger at her heels. She was the first human child ever invited to the Cathari bonding trials, and every single alien on the landing platform turned to stare at her. The Cathari bonding trials were ancient. They had existed for over 600 galactic cycles, long before humanity ever left Earth. The idea was simple. Every young sentient from a member species of the Galactic Concord would bring a companion creature from their homeworld. The pair would then compete in the grand arena to prove the strength of their bond and the worth of their species. It was part competition, part ritual, and part political theater. Concord. They were listed as a probationary species, which was a polite way of saying that no one took them seriously. They were too young, too small, too soft, and their homeworld was considered a backwater planet in a quiet arm of the galaxy. The invitation to the trials had been a courtesy, and most of the elder species expected the human representative to withdraw before the first round. They did not expect a 12-year-old girl with messy brown hair and a creature the size of a house cat. The first to approach her was a Valferi boy about her age, but taller, with silver skin and eyes that glowed faintly blue. Behind him slithered his bonded companion, a crystalline war serpent, nearly 4 meters long. Its body was made of interlocking plates of living crystal that chimed softly as it moved, and light refracted through its form like a prism. "That is your creature?" the boy asked, and he did not bother to hide his amusement. Alara looked down at Bricks, who was currently sniffing the ground and ignoring everyone. "Yes," she said, "his name is Bricks." The boy laughed and walked away, and his serpent chimed as if laughing with him. It did not get better from there. In the registration hall, Alara saw the other competitors and their bonded creatures. A Dathani girl had brought a 6-legged predator cat that crackled with bioelectric arcs along its spine. The creature moved like liquid muscle, and its eyes glowed white with stored energy. A Kreth child stood beside a living stone golem that was the size of a small shuttle. Its footsteps cracked the floor tiles, and it rumbled with a deep vibration that Alara could feel in her teeth. There were others too, a winged serpent that breathed freezing mist, a beetle the size of a horse with mandibles that could cut through starship hull plating, a creature that looked like a floating jellyfish made entirely of concentrated plasma. And then there was Bricks, who was trying to eat a cable on the ground floor. An elder Valferi diplomat walked past Alara's station and glanced at the honey badger. He paused, and then turned to his aide with a thin smile. "The humans have sent a snack for the real competitors," he said loud enough for Alara to hear. She said nothing. She had learned long ago on Harlan's Reach that words were cheap, and that the frontier did not care about your feelings. She simply picked Bricks up, tucked him under her arm, and walked to her assigned quarters. The quarters were small and bare, clearly not designed for comfort. The other competitors had been given suites with viewing balconies and environmental controls. Alara had been given what looked like a storage closet with a cot. She sat on the cot and set Bricks down beside her. "They don't think much of us," she said. Bricks climbed into her lap and pressed his nose against her hand. She scratched behind his ears, the way he liked, and he made a low rumbling sound that was almost, but not quite a purr. She had found him 3 years ago during a dust storm on Harlan's Reach. The colony's perimeter sensors had picked up a collapsed burrow, and when Alara went to investigate, she found a tiny kit, barely breathing, half buried in red dirt. She brought him home and fed him with a dropper, and slept beside him for 2 weeks, until he was strong enough to bite her, which he did almost immediately. She loved him from that moment on. He was not beautiful. He was not powerful. He had no elemental abilities, no armor plating, no venom glands. He was small and scarred and mean, and he was afraid of absolutely nothing in the universe. The next morning, all the bonded pairs were brought to the Hall of Resonance for the bonding scan. It was a ritual as old as the trials themselves. A psychic array would measure the depth and strength of the bond between each child and their creature. The Valtheri boy and his war serpent registered a bond strength of 712 units. Drew appreciative murmurs. The Dothani girl and her electric cat scored 841. The Kreth child and his stone golem hit 903, and the hall erupted in applause. Then it was Alara's turn. She stepped onto the platform with Bricks in her arms. The array powered on, and the air hummed with energy. The technicians watched their screens and waited. The numbers flickered and then scrambled, and then the screen went blank. A technician frowned and reset the system. They ran the scan again. The same thing happened. The numbers climbed and climbed, and then the system simply could not quantify what it was reading. It was not that the bond was weak. It was that the bond was so deeply woven into both of them that the machine could not find where one ended and the other began. "Equipment malfunction," the lead technician announced, and he waved Alara off the platform. She walked back to her seat and said nothing, but she held Bricks a little tighter, and he pressed his face into her neck. That evening, the arena master appeared on every screen in the complex. He was a towering figure with 4 arms and a voice like grinding stone. He announced that the first trial would begin at dawn. The Gauntlet of Endurance, he called it, and he promised it would separate the worthy from the weak. Alara stood at the window of her tiny quarters and looked down at the grand arena below. It was enormous, a bowl of dark stone that seemed to swallow the light. The other competitors were gathered on the viewing platforms, laughing and boasting and showing off their creatures. She looked down at Bricks. He was standing on the windowsill, and he was not looking at her. He was looking at the arena. His fur was bristled, and his claws were out, and his teeth were bared at the empty space below. He was ready. Alara placed her hand on his back and felt his heartbeat, strong and steady and utterly without fear. Whispered, "We show them what we are." Dawn came to Veshan Prime like a blade cutting through dark water. The violet sky turned pale, and the 3 moons faded one by one until only the sun remained burning white and cold above the towers. Alara was already awake. She had barely slept. She sat on the edge of her cot, with Bricks curled in her lap, and listened to the sound of the arena coming alive below. Machinery groaned, and the ground trembled, as the grand arena activated its biome generators. The first trial was about to begin, and the entire station was buzzing with anticipation. She dressed quickly and strapped on her boots. She clipped a small canteen to her belt and tucked a strip of dried meat into her pocket for Bricks. Then she picked him up and walked out into the corridor. The other competitors were already moving toward the arena entrance. The Valkyrie boy walked with his crystalline war serpent gliding behind him, its body catching the light and scattering it across the walls like a chandelier. Girl rode on the back of her electric predator cat, her chin held high and her eyes sharp. The Kreth child walked slowly beside his stone golem, which had to duck beneath every doorway and left cracks in the floor with each step. No one spoke to Alara. She found her place at the entrance gate and waited. When the arena master's voice boomed through the speakers, she felt it in her ribs. "Welcome to the Gauntlet of Endurance," he said. "The arena will generate a series of escalating environmental hazards: heat, cold, toxic atmosphere, predator swarms. You and your bonded creature must survive each phase. The last pair standing will be declared the victor. There are no rules except one. You survive or you do not. Begin." The gates opened, and all the competitors walked out onto the arena floor at once. The ground beneath them was smooth, dark stone, and the air was still. Alara looked around and counted 8 other pairs spread across the massive space. The crowd filled the upper galleries, thousands of aliens watching from behind shimmering barriers. Then the first phase hit. Heat. The floor turned red, and the air became a furnace. Alara gasped and dropped to one knee. The temperature climbed so fast, it felt like walking into an open flame. The Valkyrie boy's war serpent coiled around him, and its crystal body reflected the heat away like a mirror. The Dathani girl's electric cat generated a field of cool energy around them. The stone golem simply stood there, unaffected. Brix started digging. His claws tore into the arena floor, which was designed to simulate natural terrain, and within seconds he had carved a shallow trench in the softer substrate beneath the stone. Alara crawled in beside him and pressed herself against the cooler ground below the surface. It was not comfortable, but it was survivable. Brix lay on top of her back like a living shield, his thick loose skin and coarse fur absorbing heat that would have blistered exposed flesh. Heat phase lasted 12 minutes. 2 pairs were eliminated. A winged serpent that breathed cold mist overheated and collapsed, and its handler was pulled from the arena by medical drones. A beetle creature's carapace cracked under the thermal stress, and it curled into a ball, unable to continue. Then the cold came. It hit without warning. The arena floor frosted over in seconds, and the temperature plunged so far below freezing that Alara could feel her lungs burning with every breath. Ice formed on her eyelashes, and her fingers went numb almost immediately. The crystalline war serpent shattered. It happened so fast that the Valkyrie boy did not even have time to scream. One moment, the serpent was coiling protectively around him, and the next, the rapid temperature shift cracked its crystal body from head to tail. It exploded into 1,000 glittering shards, and the boy fell to his knees in the ice, surrounded by the broken remains of his companion. He was eliminated. Medical drones swarmed him and carried him from the arena. The crowd murmured in shock. Alara was shaking. She could not feel her hands, and her breath came in short white bursts. But Brix was already moving. He climbed inside her jacket and pressed his warm body against her chest. Honey badgers were survivors. Their loose, thick skin insulated them against extremes, and their metabolism burned hot, even in the worst conditions. He was like a furnace against her ribs. She wrapped her arms around her jacket and kept walking. The toxic gas phase came next. Green clouds rolled across the arena floor, and the smell hit Alara like a wall. 3 more pairs went down. The plasma jellyfish creature dissolved in the gas, and another competitor's bonded beast simply refused to move, choking on fumes until its handler surrendered. Alara tore a strip from her undershirt and soaked it with water from her canteen. She pressed it over her nose and mouth and breathed through it. In her jacket, his snout was tough and his tolerance for bad air was higher than most creatures on Earth. Honey badgers regularly raided beehives filled with smoke and dug into burrows thick with stale air. A little toxic gas was not going to stop him. Then the predator swarms came. They poured from vents in the arena walls. Hundreds of small, fast-moving combat drones designed to simulate pack predators. They had sharp limbs and moved in coordinated waves, targeting anything that moved. The Dothani girl's electric cat unleashed a burst of bioelectric energy that fried an entire wave of drones. The crowd cheered. The stone golem simply crushed them underfoot like insects. Bricks attacked. He launched himself off Alara's shoulder and hit the first drone mid-flight. His claws ripped through its casing, and he rode it to the ground. Then he was up again, charging the next one and the next. His body twisted and rolled, and his teeth found joints and weak points with an instinct that was not taught, but born into him. He fought like something that had never once in its evolutionary history considered the option of retreat. The crowd went quiet. Not because Bricks was graceful. He was not. Not because he was powerful in the way they understood power. He was small, and he bled from a dozen cuts, and he was thrown across the ground more than once. But every single time he hit the stone, he got back up, and he attacked again, harder and faster and angrier than before. It was not something they had ever seen, a creature that simply did not stop. The swarm phase ended, and the arena fell still. The dust settled, and the damaged drones lay scattered across the floor. Only two pairs remained, Ilara and Bricks, and the Dothani girl and her electric predator cat. The Dothani girl looked across the arena at Ilara, and her expression had changed. It was no longer amused or contemptuous. It was uncertain. She had watched that small, ugly creature fight with a fury. Made no sense for its size, and she did not know what to do with that information. "Your rat survived," she called out. "It won't survive the real rounds." Ilara said nothing. She was breathing hard, and Bricks was bleeding from a gash on his shoulder. But he was standing, and his eyes were locked on the Dothani girl's cat. Not with fear, with interest. The results were announced. Ilara and Bricks had finished in second place. They would have finished first, but Ilara had lost time during the cold phase. She had stopped running when she saw the Valtheri boy lying in the ice, surrounded by the shards of his broken serpent. She had knelt beside him and held his hand until the medical drones arrived. She did not regret it. The judges noted the delay. The crowd did not understand it. Why would she stop to help a competitor who had mocked her? Why would she risk elimination for someone who had laughed at her creature? They did not understand, because they had never met a human. High above the arena floor, in the upper observation gallery, a figure watched the replay on his personal screen. Commander Viral Tesh was a military attaché for the Galactic Concord, a career officer with 40 years of service. He had seen 1,000 species fight in 1,000 arenas, and he had never seen anything like what he had just witnessed. He pulled up the Earth database on his console and searched for the creature's species file. The entry was short and clinical, but one line stopped him cold. The honey badger is widely regarded as the most fearless animal on the planet. He read it again. Then he watched the footage of Bricks charging a drone 5 times his size and tearing it apart with his bare claws. He opened a secure channel to his fleet admiral and typed a single message. "Monitor the human child. The creature she has bonded with is classified in Earth's own databases as the most fearless animal on their planet." He sent the message and leaned back in his chair and watched Ilara Maddox carry her bleeding honey badger off the arena floor, whispering to him softly and pressing her forehead against his scarred fur. Something had changed on Veshon Prime. The elder species just did not know it yet. The night after the gauntlet, Ilara sat alone in her quarters and cleaned Brix's wounds with a small medical kit she had brought from Harlan's Reach. The gash on his shoulder was not deep, but it was ugly, and she dabbed antiseptic on it carefully, while he squirmed and growled. "Hold still," she said. He did not hold still. He never did. But he let her work, because he trusted her, and when she was done, he licked her hand once, and then curled into a ball on the cot, and fell asleep, like nothing had happened. Elara sat beside him, and stared at the wall. She was tired in a way that went deeper than her muscles. She was tired of being looked at, like she did not belong. She was tired of the whispers, and the laughter, and the way every alien in the complex glanced at Bricks, and then looked away, like he was not worth remembering. But they had survived. And somewhere deep in her chest, beneath the exhaustion and the loneliness, there was a small hard flame that would not go out. Was not going to quit. In the diplomatic quarters 3 levels above Ilara's storage closet, a very different kind of conversation was taking place. Ambassador Korath of the Kreth Dominion stood before a curved window that overlooked the arena. His body was massive, nearly 3 meters tall and covered in plates of living rock that shifted and ground against each other when he moved. His eyes were deep-set and burned with a dull orange light, like embers buried in stone. "The human child should have been eliminated in the first trial," he said. His voice was a low rumble that vibrated the glass. "Instead, she is being treated as a curiosity, a novelty. This is unacceptable." Beside him stood Diplomat Saron of the Valtheri Ascendancy. She was tall and thin with silver skin and a face that revealed nothing. She folded her long fingers together and spoke in a voice like silk drawn over ice. "The Concord membership vote is in 3 cycles, trials. It strengthens their petition. The elder species cannot afford to let a child and her vermin make a case for full human inclusion." Korath turned from the window. "Then we ensure she does not perform well." They summoned the arena master to a private chamber. The arena master was a being of considerable authority on Veshan Prime, but even he knew that the Kreth Dominion and the Valtheri Ascendancy held more power than any arena official. He listened to their request, and his forearms tightened at his sides. "You want me to increase the difficulty of the combat trial, specifically for the human pair," he said. "We want you to ensure a fair outcome," Saron replied, and her smile was thin and sharp. "The child has no business in the final rounds. A correction is needed." The arena master hesitated. He had overseen the trials for decades, and he had never liked the political games that surrounded them. But he also understood what happened to officials who defied them. Elder species. "It will be done," he said. Elara knew none of this. What she did know was that she was not entirely alone. On the morning after the gauntlet, she walked to the communal dining hall, which was a vast open space filled with long tables and the smells of 100 alien cuisines. She sat at an empty table and set Bricks on the bench beside her, where he immediately tried to steal food from an unattended tray. A quiet voice spoke from behind her. "May I sit with you?" Elara turned and saw a girl about her age, with smooth blue-green skin and large dark eyes that shimmered like deep water. She was an Orvani, a member of an aquatic empath species that lived on ocean worlds. In her arms, she held a long bioluminescent eel that pulsed with soft blue light. "Sure," Elara said. The girl sat down and placed the eel on the table where it coiled gently and glowed. "My name is Seleshi," she said, "and this is Luminef." "Elara, and that's Bricks," Elara responded. Looked at the eel, and the eel looked at Bricks. There was a moment of mutual evaluation, and then Bricks went back to eating, and Lumineth went back to glowing. Neither seemed impressed by the other, which Elara thought was probably a good sign. "I watched you in the gauntlet," Seleshi said. "You stopped to help the Valtheri boy. He was hurt. He laughed at you the day before." Elara shrugged. He was still hurt. Seleshi studied her for a long moment, and something shifted in her dark, shimmering eyes. "The Orvani have been part of the Concord for 200 cycles," she said. "And for 200 cycles, the elder species have mocked us. They say our creatures are weak. They say empathy is not strength. They say we are decorative members who exist to fill a seat. She paused. They only respect teeth and fire. Maybe, Alara said, or maybe they've just forgotten what real strength looks like. Celestia smiled, and it was the first genuine smile Alara had seen since. Arriving on Vashon Prime. They talked for an hour. Celestia told Alara about the Orvani homeworld, a planet of endless oceans, where the people lived in cities built into coral towers that sang with the currents. Alara told Celestia about Harlan's Reach, about the red dust and the storms, and the wild creatures that lived in the canyons. She told her about finding Bricks and raising him, and the way he would sleep on her chest during the worst storms, like the thunder did not matter as long as she was there. When they parted, Celestia said, "Be careful in the next trial. I have heard things. The Orvani are empaths. We feel what others feel, and what I feel from the Kreth delegation is not fair play. It is malice." Alara nodded and filed the warning away. That afternoon she explored the station. She told herself she was just looking around, but she was not. She was learning. She walked through the arena's lower levels and studied the mechanical systems that powered the biome generators. She found the archive of past trials and spent 3 hours reading through the configurations of every combat round for the last 50 cycles. She was not a soldier, and she was not a scientist, but she had grown up on a frontier colony where the difference between living and dying was often just knowing your environment better than it knew you. She had learned to read terrain and weather and animal behavior before she learned to read books, and she found something interesting. The combat trial always followed a pattern. The difficulty increased in stages, and the stages were calibrated to match the registered power level of each competitor's bonded creature. The system was supposed to be fair. Each pair faced threats scaled to their ability. But if someone changed the calibration settings for a specific pair, the system would generate threats far beyond what that pair was rated for. It would look like a malfunction. It would look like bad luck. Stared at the data. They were going to rig the trial against her. She was not surprised. She was angry, but she was not surprised. People who held power did not like having it questioned, and Alara's survival had questioned everything the elder species believed about humanity. She returned to her quarters and found Bricks waiting on the windowsill. He turned to look at her, and she could see in his dark eyes the same thing she felt, a readiness that went beyond words. "They're going to make it harder for us," she told him. Bricks yawned, showing every one of his teeth. "Yeah," she said, "that's what I thought too." A knock came at her door. She opened it and found Commander Viral Tesh standing in the corridor. He was tall for his species, with gray-blue skin and a face lined with decades of service. He wore no uniform, just a simple dark coat, and he looked both ways down the corridor before speaking. "Miss Maddox," he said, "I will not stay long. I am not supposed to." "Be here. Then why are you here?" "Because someone should warn you." He paused and his eyes were serious. "The next trial has been modified. Your pair will face challenges far beyond the standard calibration. I cannot tell you who ordered it, but I think you already know." Alara said nothing. "Your species has a phrase," he continued. "The nail that sticks up gets hammered. Be ready, Miss Maddox." He turned and walked away before she could respond. His footsteps faded down the corridor, and then she was alone again. She closed the door and leaned against it. She was 12 years old. She was alone on an alien planet, surrounded by species that wanted her to fail. Her only ally was a quiet empath girl with a glowing eel, and a military officer who could not even be seen talking to her. And tomorrow she was walking into a rigged arena. She looked at Bricks. He had climbed off the windowsill and was sitting on the cot, watching her with a patient, steady gaze that she had known since he was a kit in her arms. She sat down beside him and placed her hand on his back. "We're not just going to survive this," she whispered. "We're going to make them remember." Brix pressed his head against her palm, and his heartbeat was steady and strong and completely without fear. Elara pulled up the arena configuration data on their small personal screen and began to study. She would not sleep tonight. She would learn every pattern, every weakness, every possible angle of attack. They thought she was just a scared little girl with a useless animal. They had no idea what they were dealing with. The grand arena looked different in the morning light. The biome generators had been stripped away, and in their place the floor was bare dark stone, polished smooth and cold. The galleries above were packed, with more spectators than Elara had ever seen in one place. Thousands of aliens from dozens of species filled the curved tiers, and the noise of their voices washed down into the arena like a living tide. This was the second trial, the combat dominance round. Each bonded pair would face a series of arena-generated combat constructs, machines built to fight. Each wave would be harder than the last. The trial measured raw offensive power, and the pair that destroyed the most constructs or survived the longest would be declared the victor. Elara stood at the entrance gate with Brix on her shoulder. She could feel him trembling, but it was not fear. It was anticipation. His claws gripped her jacket, and his body was coiled tight, like a spring waiting to release. Had spent the entire night studying the arena's combat protocols, and she knew exactly what they had done to her. The standard difficulty for a creature of Brix's registered size and power class was Tier 2. She had found evidence buried in the configuration logs that her wave had been set to Tier 4. Tier 4 was military grade. It was designed to test warships, not children. She breathed in, she breathed out. "Okay, Brix," she said. "Remember what I told you. Listen to my voice. Trust me, and I'll trust you." He pressed his nose against her ear and made a low rumbling sound that meant he understood. The Kreth child went first. His stone golem walked into the arena center, and the first wave of constructs emerged from panels in the floor. They were armored bipedal machines, each one the size of a large man, with reinforced limbs and targeting systems that tracked movement. The golems smashed them. The first construct was pulverized with a single blow. The second was crushed underfoot. The third and fourth came together, and the golem grabbed one in each massive hand and slammed them into each other until they were nothing but sparking wreckage. The crowd roared. The golem stood in the debris, and the Kreth child raised his fist in triumph. 3 waves, 6 waves, 9 waves. The golem destroyed them all, with the brutal efficiency of a living avalanche. The Dothani girl went next. Her electric predator cat was faster than the golem, smaller but devastatingly precise. The cat moved through the constructs like lightning, literally. Arcs of bioelectricity leapt from its spine and fried the machine's internal systems before they could even engage. It was beautiful and terrifying, and the crowd loved it. 12 waves. The Dothani girl set a new record for the trials, and the galleries erupted in applause. She walked off the arena floor with her chin high and her cat crackling with residual energy. Then it was Elara's turn. The dark stone floor and the arena felt enormous around her. The galleries were a blur of alien faces, and the silence that fell was not respectful. It was expectant. They were waiting to see the human girl fail. They were waiting for the small, ugly creature on her shoulder to be broken. The first wave emerged. Elara's breath caught in her throat. The constructs that rose from the floor were not the standard combat models that the other competitors had faced. They were larger, heavier. Their armor was thicker, and their limbs ended in bladed appendages that gleamed under the arena lights. These were war-class combat drones, and they moved with a speed and precision that no Tier 2 construct should have possessed. The crowd murmured. Some of them recognized the difference. The machines were too big, too advanced, but no one said anything. Brix leapt from Elara's shoulder. He hit the ground running, and he did not hesitate. The first construct swung a bladed arm at him. He ducked under it, and launched himself at the machine's leg joint. His claws found the seam between armor plates, and he tore into it with a ferocity that made the construct stagger. It kicked him, and he flew across the arena floor, and hit the stone with a sound that made Alara's heart stop. The crowd gasped, expecting him to stay down. Brix got up. He shook himself once, and then he charged again. This time he went for the second construct. He leapt onto its back, and bit down on the cable bundle at the base of its neck. The machine thrashed and spun, trying to throw him off, but his jaws were locked, and his claws dug into the armor plating like anchors. Something inside the construct sparked and popped, and it toppled forward, crashing into the first machine. Alara watched, and she did not just watch. She read the construct's movements, the way she had read dust storms on Harlan's Reach. She saw patterns in how they turned, how they balanced, how they reset between attacks. "Brix left side low," she called out. He reacted before she finished speaking. He rolled left, and the third construct's blade cut through empty air where he had been a heartbeat before. Then he was under it, tearing at the hydraulic lines in its ankle. Joint fluid sprayed across the stone, and the machine collapsed. Wave after wave they came, each one harder than the last, each one faster and more brutal. Brix fought all of them. He was thrown into walls. He was slammed against the floor. He was cut and bruised and bleeding from a dozen wounds. And every single time he got back up. The crowd had gone silent. Not the mocking silence of before. This was something else. This was the silence of beings watching something they did not understand. A creature that was small and wounded, and outmatched in every measurable way, and yet refused, with every fiber of its being, to stop fighting. Alara called out directions, and Brix followed them with a precision that stunned them. Observers, their bond was not psychic. The scanners had failed to read it because it was not made of energy or resonance. It was made of something the machines could not measure. 3 years of shared meals and shared storms and shared sleep. 3 years of trust, built one day at a time, until the girl and the honey badger moved as one organism, thinking with 2 minds, but acting with a single purpose. The 8th wave fell, the 9th, the 10th. Then the arena master activated the final construct. It rose from a hidden panel in the center of the arena floor, and it was enormous. A siege-class combat drone standing nearly 5 meters tall, with armor plating designed to withstand orbital bombardment. Its arms ended in massive hydraulic hammers, and its targeting array locked onto Brix, with a red beam that cut through the dust-filled air. This was not part of the standard trial. This was a machine built for military testing, activated by the arena master under pressure from Kreth delegation. It was meant to end the fight quickly and decisively. It was meant to destroy the honey badger and prove once and for all that humans and their creatures were nothing. In the observation gallery, Commander Viral Tesh gripped the railing, and his knuckles went white. "That is a siege unit," he said to no one in particular. They sent a siege unit against a child. On the arena floor, Alara looked up at the towering machine and felt fear, real fear, flood through her body. It was too big, too strong. Brix could not fight that thing. No creature his size could fight that thing. But Brix was not looking at the machine. He was looking at her. And in his dark eyes, she saw no fear. She saw no hesitation. She saw only the absolute, unshakable certainty that they would face this together, the same way they had faced everything together, since the day she pulled him from the dirt on Harlan's Reach. "Go," she whispered. Brix turned and ran straight at the siege. He covered the distance in seconds, his small body low to the ground and moving faster than he had ever moved before. The construct swung one of its massive hammers downward. and the impact shattered the stone where Bricks had been a fraction of a second earlier. But he was already past it, already climbing, already clawing his way up the machine's leg with a fury that left scratches in armor designed to resist starship weapons. The construct tried to shake him off, but he held on. His claws had changed. Over 3 years on Harlan's Reach, a frontier world with higher gravity and harsher conditions than Earth, Bricks's body had adapted in ways that no one had documented. His claws were denser than a normal honey badger's, his bones thicker. His muscles had grown to compensate for the heavier gravity. Ilara had never mentioned this, because she had never thought it mattered. It mattered now. Bricks reached the construct's central chassis. He found the seam where the armor plates joined, and he drove his claws into it with everything he had. The friction superheated his claws, and they cut through the metal like heated blades, piercing the machine's core systems. The construct shuddered. Its targeting array went dark. Its limbs locked, and then it began to fall. Bricks did not let go. He drove deeper, twisting and tearing, and the construct's power core ruptured. The explosion was not large, but it was violent. The construct hit the arena floor with the force of a collapsing building, and the impact sent a shockwave through the stone. The arena floor broke. A massive spiderweb of cracks radiated outward from the impact point. Chunks of dark stone heaved upward, and dust erupted into the air like a volcano. Structural alarms screamed to life, and red warning lights flashed across the galleries. For a long, terrible moment, there was nothing but dust and noise, and the sound of cracking stone. Then the dust began to settle. The center of the crater, standing on the broken remains of the siege construct, was Bricks. He was bleeding, he was panting, his fur was scorched, and his body was shaking with exhaustion. But he was standing, and he was snarling at the empty air around him, because there was nothing left to fight. The arena was silent. 5,000 aliens from 30 species stared down at the tiny scarred creature standing in a crater of his own making, and not one of them made a sound. Then Ilara slid down the edge of the crater and walked to him. She knelt in the rubble and picked him up gently, cradling him against her chest. He stopped snarling the moment she touched him, and he licked her face once with a rough tongue, and then pressed his head into the hollow of her neck. She was crying. She did not care who saw. The silence broke. The crowd erupted, not in polite applause, not in the measured appreciation they had shown the other competitors. They roared, they screamed, they pounded on railings and stamped their feet, and the sound was so loud it shook the damaged arena floor. The Orvani delegates were weeping openly, because they could feel what Ilara felt, and what she felt was love so fierce it burned. In the upper gallery, the arena master turned to Ambassador Korath of the Kreth Dominion. The ambassador's stone face was blank. "You made it harder," the arena master said quietly, "and the creature still broke my arena." Commander Viral Tesh leaned back in his seat and laughed a real laugh for the first time in years. He opened a secure channel to the Galactic Concord Council chamber and typed one line: "Recommend immediate upgrade of humanity status. Reason, see attached footage." He attached the recording of a 12-year-old girl and a honey badger standing together in the ruins of something that was supposed to destroy them. And he pressed send. Bricks slept for most of them. He lay curled on Ilara's cot, wrapped in a soft blanket that Celestia had brought from the Orvani quarters, and he barely moved except to eat and to press his nose against Ilara's hand when she checked on him. His wounds were healing. The medical team on Veshan Prime had offered to treat him with advanced regenerative technology, but Bricks had bitten the first technician who tried to touch him. So Ilara did it herself, the way she always had. She cleaned his cuts, rubbed salve into his bruises, and talked to him softly, while he grumbled and squirmed and pretended he did not like the attention. "You're going to be fine," she told him. He looked at her with one open eye, as if to say he already knew that. Outside her quarters, the station was in chaos. The footage of the combat trial had spread across Veshan Prime within hours, and then beyond. The Galactic Communication Network carried it to every major species hub in the Concord. Millions of beings watched a tiny Earth creature leap at a siege-class military construct and bring it down. They watched the arena floor crack. They watched a 12-year-old human girl walk into the crater and pick up her bleeding companion and hold him like he was the most precious thing in the universe, and they did not know what to make of it. The political fallout was immediate. Commander Viral Tesh had not only sent his recommendation to the Concord Council, he had also leaked the Arena Master's private communications with Ambassador Korath and Diplomat Saron. The evidence was clear and damning. The combat trial had been deliberately rigged against the human pair. The difficulty had been raised 2 full tiers above standard, and a siege-class construct had been deployed in violation of every safety protocol the trials had ever established. The Arena Master was removed from his position within a day. He offered no defense. He simply said that he had followed the instructions of those more powerful than himself, and that this was how things had always worked on Veshan Prime. Ambassador Korath of the Kreth Dominion was formally censured by the Concord Council. It was the first censure of a Kreth official in over a century. His government recalled him to their homeworld in disgrace, though Alara suspected he was not truly sorry, only sorry that he had been caught. Diplomat Saran of the Valtheri Ascendancy denied everything, but the communications told a different story. She was quietly reassigned to a minor outpost on the edge of Valtheri space, where she could do no more harm. The scandal dominated every news channel on every world, and at the center of it all was a girl and a honey badger who had not asked for any of it. On the morning of the 4th day, the award ceremony was held in the Grand Hall of Veshan Prime. The hall was enormous. A domed ceiling of transparent crystal showed the violet sky above, and the 3 moons hung in the distance like old friends. The floor was polished white stone, and every seat was filled with delegates, diplomats, and citizens from across the galaxy. Ilara walked in, wearing the same boots and jacket she had worn since she arrived. She had been offered formal clothing, but she had refused. Brix rode on her shoulder, his fur still patched with healing salve, and his dark eyes scanning the room with the wary alertness of a creature that trusted very few beings in the universe. The Dafani girl and her electric predator cat stood on the other side of the stage. They had performed flawlessly in their own trials, and their scores were among the highest ever recorded. The cat sat beside its handler, and its bioelectric arcs pulsed gently in the light. The Concord Elder who presided over the ceremony was ancient, even by galactic standards. His species lived for thousands of years, and his body was thin and translucent, like paper held up to light. He spoke in a voice that carried without effort. The Kethari bonding trials exist to measure the bond between sentient and companion, he said. For centuries, we have measured this bond in units of psychic resonance, in scales of power, in displays of dominance. We have always believed that strength was the truest measure of worth. He paused and looked at Alara. We were wrong. The hall was silent. The human child Alara Maddox and her bonded companion Brix are declared co-champions of the Kethari trials, alongside the Dothani pair Kirith and Voss. This is the first time a human has ever competed in the trials, and it is the first time anyone has broken the arena floor. A ripple of laughter moved through the hall, but it was warm, not cruel. But the victory is not why I speak today, the elder continued. I speak because this trial has revealed something that the elder species have forgotten. We have spent centuries building bigger creatures, stronger creatures, more dangerous creatures. Measured bonds in watts and joules and resonance frequencies, and we missed the thing that matters most. He turned to face the full assembly. The bond between Alara Maddox and her creature is not built on psychic energy. It is not built on genetic modification or evolutionary engineering. It is built on something far older and far more powerful. It is built on love, on loyalty, on the sheer stubborn refusal to quit on each other no matter what comes. This is what humans bring to the galaxy. Not size, not power, but a bond so deep that our machines cannot even measure it. And perhaps that is the most dangerous combination any of us will ever face. The hall erupted in applause, and this time there was no hesitation, no uncertainty. The sound rolled through the chamber like a wave, and Alara felt it wash over her like warm water. Brix pressed his face into her neck, and she held him close. After the ceremony, the Valkyrie boy found her. He was standing by one of the great windows looking out at the arena below. His war serpent was gone, shattered in the cold phase of the gauntlet, and his silver skin was pale with grief. But when he saw Alara, he straightened and walked toward her. He stopped in front of her, and then he bowed. It was a deep bow, the kind that the Valkyrie reserved for those they considered worthy. Alara had read about it in the cultural database. It was not given lightly. "You stopped for me," he said. "In the gauntlet when I fell, you stopped. You held my hand until help came." He straightened and his glowing blue eyes were bright. "No one else stopped. Every other competitor ran past me. You did not. That is not weakness, Alara Maddox. That is the strongest thing anyone did in the entire trial." Alara did not know what to say, so she simply nodded, and he nodded back, and something passed between them that did not need words. The Dothani girl Kirith approached next. Her predator cat walked beside her, and its electric arcs were dim, almost gentle. She stopped in front of Alara, and for a moment her sharp, proud face wavered. "I called your companion a rat," she said. "I was wrong. What is he?" Alara smiled. "He's a honey badger." "What do honey badgers eat?" "Everything, and they don't care what fights back." Kirith looked at Brix, who was watching the predator cat with complete indifference, despite the fact that the cat outweighed him by a factor of 20. She shook her head slowly. "Humans are strange," she said. "Yeah," Alara agreed. "We are." That afternoon a Concord official approached Alara with a formal offer. She had been accepted into the Concord Academy, the most prestigious institution for young leaders in the galaxy. Only one candidate per species was admitted, each generation, and Alara was humanity's first. She accepted on one condition. "Brix comes with me," she said. "He's not my pet, he's my partner." The official looked at the small scarred honey badger sitting on Alara's shoulder, and wisely chose not to argue. Celestia found her that evening. They sat together on a bench in the station's garden level, surrounded by alien plants that glowed softly in the fading light. Lumineth, the bioluminescent eel, was draped across Celestia's shoulders, and Brix was eating something unidentifiable that he had found under a bush. "I've made a decision," Celestia said. "When I return home, I am going to petition the Orvani Council to stop hiding. We have spent 200 cycles being quiet and polite and invisible. It has not worked." She looked at Alara. "If a honey badger can break an arena floor, then my eel and I can change a council." Alara laughed, and it was the freest sound she had made since arriving on Veshan Prime. "I think you can," she said. That night, Alara sat alone on the observation deck of the station. The viewport stretched from floor to ceiling, and beyond it, the stars burned in every direction. She had never seen so many stars. Even on Harlan's Reach, where the sky was clear and the air was thin, there had never been this many. Brix was curled in her lap, finally and truly at peace. His breathing was slow and steady, and his scarred body was warm against her legs. She stroked his fur gently, and felt the rise and fall of his chest beneath her hand. She thought about home. She thought about Harlan's Reach, and the red dust, and the collapsed burrow where she had found him. She thought about the 3 years they had spent together, growing up on a world that did not care if they survived. and she thought about what came next. The galaxy was vast and old, and full of species that had been building empires, while humanity was still learning to make fire. They had technology and power and history that stretched back millennia, and they had spent all that time believing that strength meant size and that worth was measured in weapons. They had never met anything like a honey badger, met anything like a human. Below the observation deck, a dozen ships from a dozen species were already transmitting the footage of the arena fight across every communication channel in the galaxy. Within a single cycle, every inhabited world in the Concord would know the name of the tiny scarred creature that broke the floor of Veshan Prime. Ilara looked down at Brix and whispered, "They'll remember us." He was already asleep. He did not need reassurance. He never had. He was a honey badger, and honey badgers did not waste time worrying about what the world thought of them. They simply were what they were, and the world learned to deal with it. Across the galaxy, in military headquarters and diplomatic chambers and scientific institutes and the quiet homes of ordinary beings, species who had never heard of Earth pulled up the human database and searched for the entry on Mellivora Capensis. They read the first line of the file, and then they watched the footage, one more. The first line read, "The honey badger is widely regarded as the most fearless animal on the planet." They looked at the footage of the creature, standing in the crater of a broken arena, bleeding and snarling and refusing to fall, and they believed it.